Okay, in the next page of this exercise, we're on step 6, and it tells us to reopen the corridors file, which we kind of did in the previous section. We verified that there was no survey text in the 3D or cross-section view, and in the 2D view, though we did not do this step, in the 2D view it asks us to turn off the corridor 3D reference file. And so let's go back to our corridor file. And what this is we're going to make this 2D view active, and we can go ahead and close the cross-section view, and we're going to go to the reference dialog, and we're just going to turn off the display. And I'm going to move this down so you can see what gets turned off. But in here we're going to turn off, here's the corridors file, it's the 3D view of it, and I'm just going to turn that off so I don't see that in my 2D view. Now you don't have to do that, that's just my personal preference. I can see the model over here in this view. I don't have to necessarily see it in my 2D view, and again, that's just a personal preference. The other thing I like to do too is always come into this 3D view and adjust the brightness, because by default it's set at about halfway, but I like to crank it all the way up. Okay, so let's go back at the manual again. So we did step B here of 6B. In step 6C it says add the existing EOP, the survey feature 207, as corridor references. Okay, and then it says add the EOP new line as a corridor reference. And so the reason that we want to do this, I'm going to go back to the corridors file, and I'm going to look at the template library, and I'm going to look at the one that's or the template drop that's in the DGN. I'm just going to edit that template drop. Once that opens up, we've got some points out here that are going to follow some plan elements, or can follow some plan elements. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to turn the point names off, and I'm going to look at it could be either this point or that point. They're the same ones, but if we look at that, we've got two points there. One's the edge of pavement point, and one's called the seek surface point. Let's look at that seek surface point first. This one will basically project to the surface, so it's going to follow the surface wherever it goes, and then it has a horizontal constraint, but we can override that horizontal constraint with a horizontal feature constraint, which is a 207, which is that survey edge of pavement. And so what we're going to do is we're going to set the corridor, we're going to set that edge of pavement as a corridor reference, and then this template will follow that line wherever it goes at the surface. Now the other point that's got some ability to follow a plan element is this one. I believe it's this one here. This one's going to be, this is the edge of pavement new line. This is where it's going to go from the existing edge of pavement. It's going to draw some new pavement in there, and it's going to follow, or can follow, an edge of pavement new line, and that's what we got. And so that's again, if this is toggled on and it has the right feature definition, and you make that edge of pavement new a corridor reference, it will follow that in the plan view. So we'll go ahead and close that down. We'll close down our template library, and I'm going to zoom in to my drawing here, and right there is the existing edge of pavement, and then here's the edge of pavement new. Okay, and so we're going to make those active, or are going to make them corridor references. And to do that, we just have to go find a corridor grip, and there's a corridor grip right there, and there's one also right there as well. So I'm going to go click on that line, and I'm going to go to the fourth icon over, and I'm going to do the top line here, which is add corridor reference. Now you can add these corridor references one at a time. You can add them all in one shot if you want to. I'm going to do the edge of pavements first, and then I'll do the shoulder, so it'll be a two-step process. So I'm going to do this edge of pavement line, and then I'm going to do the second one with a left click, and then when I'm done I just right click, which is a reset to complete, and you should see your model kind of bump out following that edge of pavement line. There you go. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select that edge of pavement new line that's coming from the plan drawing, and that line is, I believe, this one right here. You can kind of hover over it and see that this one's the edge of pavement new, and it's coming from reference 3. And the same thing on this side. There's an edge of pavement line, and again it's coming from reference 3. Now there is also one coming from the template, which is this line, and it's the right concrete T EOP point, but again that's coming from the template, and same thing for this one as well. And so what's going to happen is, instead of the edge of pavement being this far out, it's going to bump it in and follow that line right there, and same thing on this side here. So again, I'm going to find my corridor grip. I'm going to go to the fourth icon over. I'm going to select the top option, which is add corridor reference. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to find that edge of pavement from the plan drawing. We got that one right there. And then the other edge of pavement is right here. And I'm going to reset the complete. And so again, it kind of limited the amount of widening we needed. Before, it was going based on whatever the template width was, and we didn't quite need that much because we wanted to follow this plan graphic. Now one thing that's happening though is it's getting very little pavement widening in this area here, and it gets getting smaller and smaller and smaller until it goes to nothing, and then all of a sudden it jumps out 4 feet like it's doing here. What's happening is the edge of pavement line crosses the existing pavement line, and at that point in time there is no more new edge of pavement line. It just stops right there. And so what we got to do is eventually go into the template and reduce the width of that to be a 0 width through that area, and I think we're going to do that either in this step or the next step. So let's go back and look at the manual and see where that step's at. And in fact, it is step number 7. We're going to add in a following parametric constraint, and it's going to remove that pavement widening on the left side ending at station 70 plus 52. So let's look at our station here value. Yep, 70 plus 52. And so we're just basically going to remove that pavement widening beyond that point, and it should suck that shoulder in and just match it up just perfectly right there. So to add in a parametric constraint, again, all we're going to do is click on the corridor grip, and the parametric constraints are under the corridor creation tool that looks like a hammer, and it's the larger question mark down here, which is create parametric constraint. And actually, before we do this parametric constraint, I want to show you something in the template. So I'm going to hit F4 to get out of the tool. I'm going to bring up my grips, or this time I'm going to bring up my template grips, and when I click on those I can edit that template. And the parametric constraint that we're going to try to control again is going to be this one right here. Okay, this is my pavement width. This is where my pavement starts, pavement ends, and typically if you want to wipe out an element or control its width, you go to the point that's actually defining the width of it, and it's going to be this one or that one. And so if I double click on that, you'll see that down here below there's something called label. That's a label for a parametric constraint, and for this one we got a horizontal distance of 4 foot, and the label is called left pavement surface concrete width. Okay, so if I call out that label with a parametric constraint, I can reduce the width of that, and what we're going to do is we're going to make it 0. And so in order for parametric constraints to work, you have to have a label that controls the item that you want to control. In this case, I want to control the width, which is horizontal. And so now I'm going to go to back to my corridor grip. I'm going to go to the hammer, large question mark, which is the create parametric constraints, and I'm going to go ahead and fill in some of this dialog box. This parametric constraint is going to go from 67 down to 70 plus 5289. The constraint label is going to be left pavement surface concrete width, and we're going to do a start and stop value of 0. Okay, so we're going to start this at 67 plus 00. We're going to finish this at 70 plus 52.89, which happens to be that location right here. And then I'm going to give it the right label, and these labels are pulled from the template. So we're looking for left pavement surface concrete width, and by default it puts in the default values coming from the template, which is 4 foot, but we're going to make those both 0. And so I got the whole dialog filled out, and what we should see is when I just go through and accept all these values, you should see that again, that widening go away and that shoulder just butt up just perfectly well with the other one. So I'm just going to start accepting with left clicks. And boom, that's what we're wanted to do. Okay, so we have no widening in this area, and we have a little bit of widening. It gets wider and wider and wider until it gets down to this location here. Okay, so I'm going to hit F4 to get out of the tool, and I'm going to go back to the manual. So now it says let's open up a dynamic cross-section model, and we're going to check the cross-section display at station 7168.63. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to verify what the slopes are there, because what's going to happen is that station I believe is right here. This is, let me get the dialog out of the way, 7168 and this is 65. We're going to go just shy of that and go at 63, and we're going to see what the slope is of this pavement out here, because we're going to eventually add another pavement, an approach pavement, to that, and we're going to need to adjust either the slopes here or the slopes of the approach pavement to match together so there's no bump in the road. Okay, so to do that, to look at the cross-section view, we click on the corridor, we go to the second icon, which is open cross-section model. I typically use view number 8. There's one in there already, but you still have to select or open the view, so we're going to left click in that view. And then I'm going to go down to that station value that's listed in step number 8. And again, the way you can do that is you can come to the pull down here and fill it out. And so I'm going to do 71 plus 68.63. Let's try that again. 71 plus 68.63. And I'm going to hit enter to that. Now we're not getting a cross section here, so what's happening, telling me, is we did not apply that cross section far enough down. So let's try that one more time just to make sure I had it in there correctly. 71 plus 68.63. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check my stationing range on my template, because I don't believe I selected that close enough. So I'm going to look at that, and that, if I go back to step number if I go back to step number 4J, that template drop should have went down to 71, 68, 64, and all we have is in there is 61. So let's fix that if you made the same mistake. So I'm going to put a 4 in there, and now you'll see in my cross-section model I do have a section. And that's what I was hoping for, because what I want to do is I want to find out what the slope is of this pavement, because remember, this is a overlay and widening, and the overlay follows the pavement, and so I want to know what the slope is from the center line out to the edge of pavement, so when I butt up the approach pavement it's going to be the same. Now the way this overlay and widening template work is the widening section has the exact same slope as the overlay part, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure. It's easier to measure the widening part to calculate the slope than it is trying to select the overlay part. So I'm just going to right click in this window, and I'm going to place some labels in there, and I got to make sure that this window is active. Once it's active, if I right click in that window, then I'll get some options for the cross section, and I'm going to place a temporary dimension line. Okay, and I can make this bigger if I want, so I can get it right. So I'm going to come to that point, I'm going to go to that point, and I'm going to just place the label there. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to put a point there, and see what the slopes I get. Now, in the manual, if we look at step number 8, on the left side we should get 0.52, which we do get, and on the right side we get negative 0.79. And so the template that we need to butt up to this, which will be the approach pavement, needs to have slopes that match this. Otherwise there'll be a kink. Now the approach pavement, I do know, has a default 2% slope, but we're going to adjust that over a distance using a parametric constraint so that we can transition from that 2% slope to these slopes that we have here in this view, and there'll be no jump in pavement or gap in pavement. Okay. Alright. So we verified those slopes. Next thing we need to do, let's look back at the manual. Step number 9, we're going to apply the roadway bridge approach template, and we're going to review the concrete approach pavement with barrier template, and we're going to focus on the display rules for type B barrier. Okay, and then we're going to apply the concrete approach pavement barrier with barrier from station 7168.65, which is just slightly down further, 1/100th of a foot further down than the normal roadway template, which was the overlay with widening. Okay, and then we're going to use a drop spacing of 1 foot. But let's first open up that concrete approach pavement with barrier and take a look at what that looks like. And so we're going to have to go back to our task, civil tools, corridor modeling. We're going to have to go to the second last icon on the top row, which is create template, which basically opens up our template library. We're going to go to the concrete approach pavement with barrier, and this template looks just like a roadway template, but in reality it's a little more complicated than that. And I'm going to turn off the point names. And what you can do to see if this template, this looks like just a simple template, but what you can do to see if it has any more complexity to it, you can go over to the active template tab here and click on it. And when I click on it, you'll see that I've got actually barriers in there as well. Okay, and what the reason these barriers are turned off when I go to the library view is because they're controlled by something called a display rule. And the display rule is key on these 2 points here. Okay, now the rule for that display of those barriers is if these 2 points come off of the center line, it will cause the barrier to show up. And to show you this, I'm going to go ahead and move this one. So I go down to test point controls, test all, and if I move it, this one controls the right barrier. If I right click and put it back, that barrier goes away, and then we have a ditch or fill situation. This point up here will do the same thing, and this one will control the left side. If that moves off of center, that point, a barrier shows up. And again, this is called a display rule, and there are some videos out there for display rules, and if you would like this functionality added to any of your templates, just drop me a line here at CAD support. Anybody at CAD support should be able to help you with that, and they'll send you some videos on how to do display rules. Okay, so I'm going to right click and put that back. Okay, so what's going to happen is these 2 points, if I open one up, seek a barrier type B line style. If we have a line out in our plan view and we target it and it sees it, this element will jump over to it and cause the barrier to show up. And so basically a line in our plan view is going to control whether or not the barrier is displayed or not. Okay, so I'm going to close that down. I'm going to close that down. Now the next step in this exercise, so we reviewed the concrete approach pavement. We're going to apply the concrete approach pavement from this station down to 72 plus 37. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, to add a template drop, we're just going to go to the corridor grips again. We're going to go to the hammer tool, We're going to go to the Create Template Drop icon. It's going to ask us for the template. There's no way to select the template except for the option where it's kind of in blue on my heads up prompt there. It says select template. Do the Alt down to browse to template. So I'm going to do the Alt key on my keyboard and then the down arrow, and it'll bring up the Pick Template option. And it's still pointing to the old template, but now we're going to select the concrete approach pavement with barrier. And I'm going to accept that template. Now it's going to ask me for the station range. Again, I'm going to go from station 71 plus 68.65, just a hair further down than that overlay and widening template. And it's going to ask for the end template. I'm just going to go down a little ways. So I'm going to go down to 72 plus 37. Enter that. And I just went down past my end bent a little bit. We're going to take care of that later on. We're not really going to model this area with this template all the way down to this location. We're actually going to do some corridor clipping later on, what it's called. And so we're just going to accept that, and we're going to do a drop interval of every 1 foot. We want it really tight in this area, and we're not going to worry about transition before or after, and we're going to accept that. Okay. If we look in our model, you should see the approach pavement in there now. It looks different than the overlay and widening. Here's the overlay and there's the widening, but you'll also notice, I'm going to hit F4 because it's still wanting to drop another template to get out of that tool. You'll notice that there's a gap there, and that's why we measured the slopes of the overlay and widening so that we can adjust the approach pavement to adjust it up on this one to match that slope. And the same thing on this side over here. We need to adjust this up so it matches that pavement over there. And the way we're going to do that is with a parametric constraint, and that's going to be our next step. So if we look back at the manual, come down to step number 10, you can see we're controlling the constraint label is the left pavement surface concrete slope and the right pavement surface concrete slope. And again, if I would go back into my template, this time I'm going to go into the template that I'm going to be controlling, which is going to be this one that we just placed. And if I look at that template and I've identified this point or that point, you'll see that that parametric constraint label is in there. And so here's the slope constraint. That's why I want to control. And if I look down, there's the parametric constraint label, left pavement surface concrete slope. Okay, so that's how we're going to control that. So to add a parametric constraint, just like we did before, we select the corridor grip. We go over to the hammer tool, which is the corridor creation tools. We slide down to the big question mark, which is the create parametric constraints. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill in this dialog box. We're going to start on the left side at 71 plus 68.65. We're going to go down to a stop station of 71 plus 78.65. So we're just doing this over a distance of 10 feet. I need to get the right parametric constraint label, which is going to be left pavement surface concrete slope. And it'll put in the default values from that template. What we're going to do is we're going to try to again match this slope on the left side, which is over here. That's the left side, and we're going to put in a 0.52, enter that, and we're going to go down to a 2%. So I'm going to zoom into this left side and just see if this left side kind of heals itself when we put in this parametric constraint. And now I'm just going to left click to accept all the values. So you can see it came up and is matching the slope on the other side. So now I'm going to come over to this one and see if we can get this one healed. I need to change the parametric constraint to the right side, which is down here, just one above it. And let's see if we're going to use the same values. We are. We're just transitioning that slope differential over 10 feet. This one though is going to be start off with a negative 0.79%, and we're going to go to a -2. Okay, so we're just going to go out there and accept the values again, and then hopefully it heals itself again, and it sure does. Okay. Now, if you still have a gap in there, the manual states that you might want to check. To make sure that the existing ground terrain is active, because that can throw off whether or not that slope comes up all the way or not properly. So just be aware of that. If your two pavements still have a little bit of a gap, you might want to check that existing pavement. So this ends video number 2, because we're done with page 2, and the next video will start on page 3, and we're going to start working with creating a terrain model from the 3D model.